For 4 years, one group of chimpanzees systematically tracked down every single member of a neighboring community in the forests of western Tanzania. Not in one confrontation, not by chance. One by one, across years, whenever they found someone from the other group alone, a scout, a forager, a younger male wandering too close to the edge, the outcome followed the same pattern. By 1978, the Kasekela community had absorbed the territory of the Kahama community entirely, and the Kahama community no longer existed as a group. The researcher who watched this unfold, Jane Goodall, had spent years before this documenting chimpanzees, pan-troglodytes, as complex, social, emotionally rich animals. The organized campaign between these two groups forced a significant revision of what those words meant. Chimpanzees live across equatorial Africa, forests, woodlands, and gallery forests stretching from Senegal in the west to Uganda and Tanzania in the east. Adult males average between 40 and 70 kilograms. Their muscle fibers are denser than ours, which translates to roughly 1.5 times the physical force of a human of equivalent size. They use tools, form alliances, recognize faces, and remember social debts across years. None of that is the surprising part. The border patrols move in near silence. A group of males, typically 3 to 8, travels toward the edge of their territory and slows. They stop and listen. They follow traces. If they find a member of the rival community alone, the group acts as a unit. If they're outnumbered, they pull back. If they're not, they don't. The calculation is consistent. They are not reacting to a threat. They are actively looking for one. When a rival group has young ones from males that the dominant community wants removed from the population, those young ones don't make it out of the encounter. It isn't driven by rage or hunger. The pattern has been documented across multiple research sites in Africa, and the logic follows the same line every time. Reduce the future strength of the opposing group before that strength becomes a problem. That's a long horizon calculation. Chimpanzees make it routinely. What a group gains from a campaign isn't just land. It's water access, fruit trees, and females from the absorbed community, who over time integrate into the new group. The expansion is functional, and its returns are precise. The Kasekela community moved into Kahama territory and used everything in it. There are roughly 300,000 chimpanzees remaining in the wild. Each regional population develops its own material culture, and these cultures don't cross group lines during active competition. In one site in West Africa, a community uses stone hammers to break open hard-shelled nuts, a technique passed down through generations by observation. A neighboring group, a few kilometers away, with access to the same nuts and the same stones, has never been documented doing it. The knowledge exists on one side of the boundary and not the other. Groups that compete for territory don't share what they know. That information is part of what makes the group worth defending. We share approximately 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees. The split from a common ancestor happened around 6 million years ago. The organized group conflict that Goodall documented at Gombe was not a response to captivity or human pressure or some unusual breakdown of normal behavior. It was already there, operating with structure, timing, and clear intent. The only thing that changed in 1974 was that someone was present long enough and paying close enough attention to recognize it for what it was. There is also the rain dance. During heavy storms, adult males have been observed performing what researchers call a rain display. They stand upright, sway, tear branches from trees, charge repeatedly at nothing, and vocalize with increasing intensity for minutes at a stretch. No one fully understands what it means. It doesn't appear to serve a practical purpose related to the storm. It looks like something between a territorial display and something harder to name. It is, as far as anyone knows, unique to chimpanzees. And it has been happening, unprompted, in forests across Africa, long before any researcher was there to see it. Bottlenose dolphin. Bottlenose dolphins, Tursiops truncatus, have an image. Helpful, playful, intelligent, the kind of animal that shows up in photographs leaping alongside research boats. That image is not invented. It just covers a lot of ground it shouldn't be covering. Off the coast of Western Australia, in a stretch of shallow ocean called Shark Bay, researchers have spent decades mapping the social structure of a resident dolphin population. What emerged from that work is not easy to summarize briefly. Adult males form stable coalitions of 2 or 3 individuals. Those coalitions build working relationships with other coalitions. Those second-tier groups connect outward to other clusters of alliances. The result is a 3-layered social network, the most structurally complex alliance system documented in any non-human animal, built entirely around access to resources and reproductive competition. When an allied group of males targets a female, the approach is coordinated. They flank her, maintain positions, and hold the formation. For hours, sometimes for days at a stretch. Her available range shrinks progressively until it is effectively gone. Researchers use the term mate coercion for what this describes. The dolphins were doing it long before the term existed. The acoustic dimension of their conflicts is worth slowing down on. Dolphins generate low-frequency sound pulses that, at sufficient intensity and proximity, create a disorienting pressure effect. When rival male coalitions encounter each other, those pulses are not communication. They're not warnings. They're applied force, an extension of the same biological system that lets a dolphin echolocate a fish through murky water at range, repurposed to destabilize other members of its own species. Each bottlenose dolphin has a signature whistle, a specific acoustic pattern that functions as an individual identifier. Other dolphins use it the way you use a name, to address that specific individual, not just to get general attention. The social memory this requires is precise and long-term, which means alliances are stable, rivalries persist across seasons, and a dolphin whose behavior worked against the group's interests in a previous conflict is remembered as having done exactly that. Their physical recovery from injury stands out across mammals. Wounds from shark encounters, the kind that would permanently scar almost any other large mammal, close quickly and cleanly, without the raised tissue formations that normally mark serious trauma. The biology responsible for this is still being studied, but the practical outcome is straightforward. An animal whose social environment involves sustained competition and occasional serious confrontation is also built to return to full condition from it faster than almost anything else in the ocean. The forehead, that rounded, distinctive shape, is not bone. It's a structure called the melon, a dense mass of fatty tissue that focuses sound into a directed beam for echolocation. It also means a bottlenose dolphin can effectively look inside another animal using sound. They can detect the skeletal structure of a fish. They can sense the air in a lung. Whether they use that information in competitive contexts has not been formally established. But they have the capacity. The smile is the anatomical shape of the jaw. It doesn't shift with context. It was there before the interaction started, and it will be there after. Crow. A crow, Corvus corax, saw your face. Not metaphorically. Individual crows recognize specific human faces and retain that recognition for years. If an encounter went poorly, a trap, a direct threat, someone who came too close to a nest during a critical window, that face is categorized, and the categorization is communicated. Juveniles with no direct experience of a specific person have been documented responding to alert calls from adults who did have that experience, when that person returned to the same location months or years later. What one generation learned from a direct encounter, the next generation carries secondhand. The response is functionally the same either way. Crow groups organize around food sources and nesting territories. When 2 groups compete for the same location, younger males without established positions will form loose coalitions, not formal alliances but working arrangements, that probe the edges of a resident pair's range. If the pair signals consistent strength, the challengers back off. If not, they push further. It runs like a slow negotiation conducted entirely in presence and timing, where the cost of losing ground is starting over from nothing. What gets called a crow funeral, a gathering of multiple crows around one that has gone down in a particular location, is not grieving. It is information processing. When a member of a group stops moving in a specific place, other crows in the area need to determine whether that place is now dangerous, what category of danger it represents, and how to adjust movement patterns around it. They land close, observe, vocalize, and eventually disperse. The conclusion travels through the local group. For a period after that, the location is treated with caution. and that pattern of avoidance spreads outward. No coordinator is required. The network runs the assessment by itself. The cognitive profile is not easy to set aside. Crows pass mirror self-recognition tests, placing them in a narrow group that also includes great apes, elephants, and dolphins. They cache food and then relocate those caches specifically when they observed another crow watching the original hiding process, which requires modeling what the other crow now knows and predicting what it will do with that information. They use tools in sequence, retrieving a short object to reach a longer one, which is then used to access the actual target. In multiple locations with no apparent contact between populations, crows have been documented dropping hard-shelled nuts onto roadways at intersections, waiting for vehicles to break them open, and collecting the contents during pedestrian crossing signals. That technique has been independently developed more than once, in more than one country, which means it was worked out from scratch more than once. The brain of a crow is smaller than a closed fist. Neuron density per unit of tissue, in the regions responsible for the behaviors above, matches or exceeds measurements from most primates. The architecture is entirely different. Birds have no cortex in the mammalian sense, but what it produces in terms of planning, social modeling, and long-term memory is not meaningfully behind what a mammalian cortex produces in animals several times the size. They've also been documented climbing snow-covered rooftops and sliding down them, returning to the top, doing it again. No food involved, no function identified. It appears to be something they do because the option is there. The group that holds the food source holds the territory. The group that holds the territory gets through winter intact, and the record of who threatened that position, the specific face, the specific place, the specific outcome, does not fade. It gets passed to the ones who weren't there to see it. Spotted hyena. The lion is stronger. It is heavier, faster over short distances, and its strike force is considerable. None of that matters in a sustained confrontation with a hyena clan, because the hyena has something the lion doesn't, a heart built for duration. The spotted hyena, Crocuta crocuta, has a heart that is proportionally larger than a lion's relative to body weight. That difference in cardiovascular capacity means that in a chase, which can last several miles across open savanna, the hyena simply outlasts. It is not the faster animal. It is the one still running when the other one stops. Clans of spotted hyenas run into the dozens, and they are led by females, not as an anomaly, as the baseline. The alpha female holds the highest rank in the clan, above every male regardless of size or age. When a clan member is cornered or pressured by a lion, or a group of lions, that hyena calls. A specific high-frequency vocalization that the rest of the clan recognizes not as distress, but as a signal requiring a headcount response. They arrive. The math shifts. The lions, who moments before held the advantage, suddenly don't. What follows has been filmed enough times that it is well documented. Hyenas surrounding a group of lions, calling in additional members until the numbers tip decisively, and then pressing until the lions leave the carcass or leave the area entirely. When the lions return, the same calculation begins again. Neither side wins permanently. They adjust. The territorial wars between clans run across generations, the same boundary lines, contested by the same family lineages, for decades. Each clan maintains scent markers along its perimeter and patrols them with regularity. When a member crosses into rival territory and is caught, the response is fast and coordinated. These are not random skirmishes. They are part of an ongoing map that each new generation inherits and continues defending without any individual having chosen the original terms. The hyena's digestive system is a significant part of why this competition is so persistent. The stomach acid is strong enough to process material that would pass through almost any other predator untouched, including bone. A spotted hyena can extract nutrition from a carcass that a lion has already abandoned. That means they are operating at a resource level most predators can't access, and the overlap with lion territory is therefore not incidental. They are both competing for the same ecological space, and neither one can simply relocate to avoid the other. The reputation, scavenger, opportunist, cowardly follower, does not survive contact with the data. In documented feeding events across East and Southern Africa, Spotted hyenas make their own catches in roughly 95% of cases. Lions, in the same ecosystems, take from hyenas roughly as often as hyenas take from lions. The balance is approximately even. Only one of those two species has carried the other's reputation for the entirety of recorded human history. The vocalization that gave them their common name, the laugh, is not amusement. It marks submission or frustration. An animal capable of fracturing a giraffe's femur with its jaw produces that sound when it finds itself in a situation it does not want to be in. Gray wolf. The leading cause of fatality for gray wolves, Canis lupus, in the wild, is not human activity. It is not winter or starvation or predation from larger animals. It is other wolves. Territorial conflicts between packs account for more wolf fatalities per year than any other single factor across studied populations. That number is not a product of unusual stress or resource scarcity. It is the baseline. Packs maintain boundaries through scent marking, howling, and direct confrontation. And when two packs meet on contested ground, the outcome is frequently permanent. Before any direct conflict, there is reconnaissance. A wolf will enter rival territory moving carefully, reading scent markers, assessing the freshness of trail signs, estimating group size from the density of traces left behind. How many? How recent? Whether the math looks favorable. This information is gathered before any engagement begins. What follows is a function of what the scout found. When a pack locates the denning site of a rival group, the place where the next generation is being raised, the incursion is not random in its timing or its targets. The young ones from a rival pack that don't survive a territorial attack represent the future size of that rival group, and packs appear to operate with some functional understanding of this. The pattern is documented consistently enough across multiple research populations that it holds as a behavioral tendency rather than an isolated event. The omega, the lowest-ranking wolf in a pack, carries a social function that doesn't have a comfortable name. After a territorial loss or a sustained period of internal tension, the omega absorbs a disproportionate share of the group's redirected aggression. This appears to serve a pressure release function for pack cohesion. The omega that survives this role does so through a consistent and precise expression of deference, not weakness, but managed submission. It is a specific social skill, and it requires real-time calibration. Gray wolves have interdigital webbing, membrane connecting the toes, that functions as natural snowshoe material. On hard-packed snow, this changes nothing. On soft, fresh snow, it allows a wolf to run across a surface that a deer or elk of much greater body weight will sink into, slowing them enough to close gaps that would otherwise remain open. The prey's anatomy becomes an obstacle it cannot resolve. The wolf's anatomy was already built for the surface the prey is struggling with. One persistent misunderstanding about wolf social structure is worth correcting. The dominance hierarchy documented in captive wolf groups, constantly contested, enforced through visible aggression, does not appear in long-term studies of wild packs. A wild pack is, in most cases, a family unit. The adults lead because they are the parents. The younger wolves follow because they were born into that relationship. The behavior that looks like enforced rank is, in most wild contexts, the same behavior a family uses to organize itself around a common goal. The structure is real. The framing that made it famous is not. The howl at dusk from a fixed location tells every pack within roughly 9 kilometers where the group is, approximately how many members it has, and that the space is occupied. Packs that hear it factor it into their movements. A lone wolf howling is either searching for its own group or probing whether anything nearby is willing to engage. The silence that sometimes answers is not nothing. It is also information. Meerkat. The war formation looks like this. A line of meerkats, side by side, fur standing on end, tails raised, advancing in locked step toward the rival group. They bounce slightly as they move. The effect, to the rival clan watching from across the scrub, is of a single organism substantially larger than any individual meerkat. That is the intention, and it works often enough to be worth doing every time. Meerkats, suricata, live in groups called mobs, typically between 10 and 30 individuals, across the arid scrublands and semi-deserts of southern Africa. Each mob is structured around a dominant female whose authority over the group is without exception. She is the only female in the mob that reproduces. If any other female in the group becomes pregnant, the dominant female removes those offspring before they can become a factor. Subordinate females sometimes spend entire foraging seasons serving as full-time caretakers for the dominant female's young, standing watch for hours without eating, carrying young they did not produce, absorbing the physical cost with no reproductive return. The structure functions without negotiation. It functions because the cost of challenging it is higher than the cost of accepting it. When two rival mobs meet on contested terrain, the war dance is the opening move. If that display does not settle the matter, it becomes a physical confrontation, and the outcome has direct consequences for territory, specifically access to the underground insect networks that sustain the group during the dry season. The losing mob retreats and compresses into a smaller range. The winning mob expands into the vacated space. The alarm call system meerkats use is one of the most informationally specific documented outside of primates. A meerkat that spots a martial eagle approaching from altitude produces a different call than one that spots a jackal approaching at ground level. The call encodes the type of threat, its position, and the speed of approach. The group's response, whether to scatter vertically into burrows or stand their ground and mob, is determined by the acoustic content of the call, not by any individual's direct sighting. Young meerkats are not born knowing how to interpret this system correctly. They learn it. Adults modify their own calling behavior based on the developmental stage of the juveniles around them, producing simplified versions of alert calls near young pups and gradually increasing specificity as those pups demonstrate comprehension. This is structured instruction. It has been observed and documented in controlled conditions. It is not incidental. Their diet involves scorpions, venomous snakes, and spiders, whose bites would incapacitate most animals their size. The venom resistance is real and develops through graduated exposure managed by adults in the group. An experienced meerkat will bring a live scorpion to a juvenile with the stinger already removed. Allow the juvenile to practice handling it and progressively introduce less disabled prey as the juvenile's technique improves. The transfer of technique here is deliberate and staged. It takes weeks. The dark patches around a meerkat's eyes are not incidental coloring. They function the same way black grease does under the eyes of athletes competing in direct sunlight, reducing glare, improving contrast against a bright sky. Meerkats spend a significant portion of their day scanning elevated positions for aerial threats. Their eyes need to function in full equatorial sun. The patches are part of the hardware. The sentinel system, where one individual stands elevated and watches while the rest of the mob forages below, is sometimes described as altruistic. It isn't exactly that. The sentinel calling all clear has a direct line of sight to the best foraging areas and tends to be among the first to reach them once the group begins moving. The arrangement still benefits the group. It just also benefits the one giving up the time to stand watch. That's not a problem. It's why the system persists. Hamadryas baboon. Several hundred baboons, one contested slope. The conflict assembles with a structure that takes a moment to read, not because it's chaotic, but because it isn't. Hamadryas baboons, Papio Hamadryas, organize their society in 4 distinct layers. The smallest is a one-male unit, a dominant male, a small number of females, and their offspring. Several of these units form a clan. Multiple clans form a band that travels and forages together during the day. Multiple bands share a sleeping cliff and constitute a troop. When 2 troops meet on contested terrain, what lines up across from each other is not a crowd. It is a nested structure of units within units, assembled by social logic that every individual in the group understands precisely. Male Hamadryas baboons have canines that are longer than those of a lion. They are not for feeding. The diet is primarily vegetarian: grasses, roots, seeds, occasional small animals. The canines are for one specific context: direct confrontation with rival males over reproductive access and social rank. They are present in every adult male, displayed frequently, used infrequently, and the possibility of their use structures every interaction in the group from a distance. After a confrontation where rank shifts, The male who lost does not simply accept the new arrangement and move on. He approaches the winner and begins grooming him. This is not reconciliation in any warm sense. It is a precise demonstration of submission, performed until the winner acknowledges that the hierarchy has been updated. A male who fails to execute this correctly does not remain in the group long enough to try again. Young females in Hamadrya's society are sometimes brought into a male's unit through a process that begins when they are juveniles, led away from their birth group incrementally, integrated over time through consistent proximity management. The male monitors the female's movements through what researchers describe as herding behavior. Corrective pressure applied whenever she moves toward rival males or toward the edge of his range. This continues until her integration is complete, and she is no longer oriented toward leaving. Other males in the group observe this and do not intervene. It is part of the structure. Group-level decision-making operates on a different logic entirely. When the band needs to determine where to travel for the day, which direction, which water source, which foraging ground, no one announces the plan. Individuals begin moving in their preferred direction in small increments and pause to observe. If enough individuals align on the same vector, the group coalesces and moves. If two competing directions gather significant support, the group can split temporarily before reconverging. The male with the most social capital carries more influence in this process, but no single individual imposes the outcome. The system aggregates preference. It is the one moment in the daily life of a Hamadryas troop where the dominant structure relaxes without consequence, and nobody calls attention to it. The baboon's vocal recognition is comprehensive in a way that requires emphasis. Individual Hamadryas baboons distinguish between hundreds of voices and track the social relationships encoded in those voices, not just their own relationships, but those between third parties. A baboon hearing a call from individual A directed at individual B understands something operational about the current state of the relationship between A and B, without being directly involved. They maintain a live, continuously updated map of who stands where relative to everyone else in the group. This is where the actual leverage in the group resides. Not in the canines, not in physical size. In the accuracy and currency of that map, and in the speed with which it can be acted on. Argentine ant. There is a single ant colony that runs along the southern coast of Europe, down the California coastline, and into parts of southwestern Japan. These are not related colonies that happen to share similar behavior. They are genetically and chemically one colony, separated by thousands of kilometers of open ocean, connected by nothing except the fact that an Argentine ant from Catalonia and an Argentine ant from San Diego will recognize each other as members of the same group on direct contact and will not engage. This is the Argentine supercolony, Linapithema humile, and it is the largest cooperative structure in the animal kingdom by a significant margin. It did not evolve to be this way. It spread, carried in soil ballast on cargo ships in the late 19th century, and as it moved into new environments where the founding population was small and genetically narrow, the chemical signals that normally cause ant colonies to treat strangers as rivals simply stopped triggering. Every individual in the new population smelled similar enough to every other individual that the recognition system returned ally instead of enemy. The colony expanded without internal conflict. It has been expanding ever since. The tactical approach to rival colonies is systematic and predominantly chemical. Argentine ants do not prioritize individual combat the way many ant species do. They use formic acid, sprayed into the path of approaching rivals, to create a disorienting chemical environment that slows and compromises enemy coordination. More consequentially, they locate the foraging routes of neighboring colonies and block them. Workers are stationed at key intersections between a rival nest and its food sources, not to engage but to prevent access. The rival colony weakens from resource deprivation rather than direct confrontation. It takes longer. It is more reliable. The chemical dependency that makes the supercolony possible also produces its most consistent failure mode. Ant trails are maintained through continuous pheromone marking. When a group of workers loses the terminal signal, when the end of the trail becomes ambiguous, they continue following the last known direction. If that direction curves back onto itself, the group enters a loop. The loop self-reinforces because each pass adds fresh pheromone to the same path. The ants continue walking, in circles, for hours, until the last one stops. These formations have been documented in multiple ant species since the 19th century. The protocol that keeps the colony organized is the same one that cannot recognize when following it has stopped making sense. Argentine ants also maintain consistent disposal sites for non-viable colony members, specific locations away from the nest where workers carry individuals that have stopped functioning. The behavior is triggered by a specific chemical signal released as organic decomposition begins. When researchers applied that same chemical signal to a live, healthy ant, workers attempted to carry it to the disposal site while it was still moving. The ant resisted. The workers persisted. The chemical signal outweighed the behavioral evidence that nothing was wrong with the target. After enough attempts and escapes, the marked ant eventually cleaned the compound off itself. The workers lost interest immediately. The estimated combined mass of all ant species currently living on Earth is approximately equal to the combined mass of all living humans. That figure has been revised upward multiple times as sampling methodology has improved. The Argentine supercolony accounts for a substantial portion of that number across the temperate zones where it has taken dominance. The war it runs is not dramatic. It is continuous, chemically precise, resource-oriented, and it has been advancing into every new environment it has reached for over 100 years without meaningful reversal. Termite. The head of a Nasut soldier termite is built like a syringe. Not as a metaphor, the skull structure has been modified over millions of years of selection into a pressurized delivery system with a hardened nozzle at the front that projects sticky toxic resin onto anything that breaches the colony's perimeter. The Nasutiterms, cannot bite. Its mandibles have been reduced to near nothing in the process of optimizing the entire head for this one function. It gave up the ability to feed itself in exchange for becoming a more effective defensive tool. Termites, order Bladodea, infraorder Isoptera, have been in sustained chemical and physical conflict with ant species for tens of millions of years. The two groups occupy overlapping ecological space across the tropics. They both construct complex underground networks, and they compete for the same decomposing organic material as a primary food source. The result of this arms race on the termite side is one of the most specialized and varied soldier castes in the insect world. A range of body plans that exist for no purpose other than different methods of stopping ants. Some species have taken this further than the Nasute. Certain Neocapriterms workers accumulate toxic compounds in specialized glands that run along the length of the body over the course of their lives. As the worker ages past its peak functional period, these glands reach maximum load. Under extreme muscular contraction, a last deliberate act, the glands rupture, releasing the accumulated compounds outward in a burst that incapacitates or eliminates nearby attackers. The worker does not survive this. The compounds take months to build up. The worker spends its entire life loading a mechanism it will use exactly once at the end. The colony gets a detonation. The individual is the delivery system. The architecture of a termite mound is not passive structure. It is a functional environmental control system. The interior maintains temperature within a narrow viable range regardless of what the air outside is doing, achieved through a network of vertical shafts that draw cooler air up from the deep subsurface and vent metabolically warmed air through convection from the upper sections. The carbon dioxide produced by millions of individuals and the fungal gardens the colony cultivates drives this airflow as a byproduct of biology. When researchers blocked the ventilation shafts of a functioning mound, the termites rebuilt them within hours, restoring the internal climate before it deteriorated past viable limits. The repair priority was the air, not the wall. At the center of a mature colony is the royal chamber. The queen and the king have been in it for decades, up to 50 years in documented cases. The queen's abdomen has expanded over time to a length several times that of a worker, her body now primarily a reproductive organ maintained by a continuous supply of workers, feeding her through the chamber walls. She produces approximately 1 egg every 2 seconds, around 30,000 per day. The king remains with her, continuously active. Neither one will leave the chamber again. The workers that care for them will never see the outside of the nest. The whole structure exists to protect this room and the output it produces. Termites are, taxonomically, modified cockroaches. The last common ancestor between termites and their nearest cockroach relatives is roughly 150 million years old. The colonial eusocial structure, with a sterile worker caste, a reproductive pair, and a defensive soldier caste, evolved independently multiple times across the termite lineage. The same organizational solution appeared from different starting points whenever the environmental pressures aligned correctly. It kept being the right answer. They are also, despite the reputation, ecologically essential. In tropical savannas, termite activity turns over soil at a rate comparable to earthworms in temperate systems, cycling nutrients that sustain the plant communities above them. The mounds alter drainage patterns, concentrate minerals, and create elevated structures used as refuges and lookout positions by dozens of other species. The animal that shares a hemisphere with the Argentine ant and has been at war with it for 50 million years is also what keeps a significant portion of that hemisphere's soil functioning. Naked mole rat. Apply dilute acid to the skin of a naked mole rat, Heterocephalus glaber, and it notices. It does not respond the way every other mammal tested under equivalent conditions responds. The neurological channel that translates acidic compounds into a pain signal, present and functional in all tested mammals, is incomplete in naked mole rats. They register the contact. They move away from the source. Then they go back to what they were doing. Researchers comparing the response to that of mice under identical conditions noted the difference as immediate and unambiguous. The mouse response was obvious. The naked mole rat's response looked like mild inconvenience. They are also essentially resistant to cancer. The mechanism, involving a specific cellular compound called high molecular mass hyaluronan that appears to prevent the runaway replication underlying most solid tumor formation, has been studied closely since it was identified. In decades of maintained captive colonies, spontaneous cancer has appeared in isolated individuals, but at a rate so far below that of any size-equivalent rodent that the comparison barely registers. Their maximum documented lifespan is 37 years. A mouse of comparable body size lives approximately 4. All of this in an animal that, externally, looks like a wrinkled thumb with teeth. Naked mole rat colonies range from 20 to over 300 individuals and are structured as eusocial units, a single reproductive female, a small number of reproductive males, and a large workforce that does not reproduce. The workers maintain the tunnel network, locate and transport food sources, and care for the offspring of the reproductive female. The soldiers hold the colony's perimeter. The structure is functionally identical to a bee colony or an ant colony. These are not insects. They are mammals. They arrived at the same organizational answer independently from a completely different evolutionary starting point, under the same set of pressures: confined space, concentrated resources, high predation risk above ground, and the survival advantage of coordinated numbers over individual capability. When a rival colony's tunnel network makes contact with another colony's system, which happens because underground tuber deposits are finite and both groups are extending toward the same sources, the soldiers respond at the breach point. They fill the tunnel with their own bodies, pressing in to create a physical seal that the rival group cannot advance through. The individual holding the front position does not give ground. Workers cycle fresh soldiers in behind. The standoff holds until one colony's push is exhausted and the breach can be sealed. The tunnel wars are slow, dark, and decided by which colony has more bodies to commit to a fixed point, when the reproductive female of a defeated colony is no longer present. The surviving workers of that colony are sometimes integrated into the winning colony's population. The mechanism is chemical. The winning colony's scent profile is applied to absorbed workers through sustained physical contact over days, gradually replacing the chemical markers that identified them as foreign. The absorbed individuals begin registering as members. There is no evidence of sustained resistance to this process once the original colony's social structure has fully collapsed. The identity that was overwritten is not mourned. There is no system in place to mourn it. The queen of a naked mole rat colony undergoes an anatomical change that has no direct parallel in any other mammal. Her lumbar vertebrae, the lower back segment, lengthen over the course of repeated pregnancies. The internal volume of her body cavity increases. Her diameter does not. She becomes longer, not wider. The tunnel system she inhabits has a fixed width determined by the substrate geology. She needs to continue moving through it as she ages and her reproductive output increases. The spine solves this without changing the footprint. The colony's infrastructure does not need to be rebuilt. Her skeleton reorganizes instead. Naked mole rats cannot regulate their own body temperature internally. They are the only mammals confirmed to be functionally ectothermic. The body temperature tracks the ambient temperature of the surrounding soil. In the stable, deep soils of East Africa where they live, this is manageable. When the tunnel cools, the colony clusters. The combined metabolic output of hundreds of individuals in close contact raises the local temperature enough to compensate. A mammal solving with collective behavior a problem that most of its relatives solved physiologically a very long time ago. The incisors sit in front of the lips rather than behind them. This allows the animal to use its teeth to move soil without filling its mouth. The two lower incisors operate independently, capable of moving in different directions simultaneously, a function that works like precision grasping in complete darkness, where visual guidance is not available and every object is identified through contact and chemical signal. Their eyes exist. They detect gross light changes and movement. They do not resolve detail that would be relevant to anything the naked mole rat needs to do. The investment in fine vision was redirected somewhere else a long time ago. What they are, in the end, is a mammal that found the exact same answer the ants and the bees found. One reproductive individual at the center. A large non-reproductive workforce managing the infrastructure. Soldiers holding the boundary. The individual subordinated to the colony in every calculation, without a mechanism for exceptions. The solution keeps appearing because it keeps working. Hippopotamus. The fluid is red. It appears on the skin of a hippopotamus, Hippopotamus amphibius, within minutes of sun exposure, seeping from pores across the body without being sweat in any conventional sense. It is an oil, a secretion unique to hippos, that functions simultaneously as a sunscreen, an antimicrobial agent, and a temperature regulator. Researchers spent years trying to determine whether it was pigmented or whether it only appeared red due to oxidation. It does both. The compound is genuinely reddish, and it deepens in color on contact with air. The phrase that attached to it, blood sweat, is inaccurate on both counts, but it persists because the visual is exactly what the phrase suggests. The hippopotamus is the third largest land animal on Earth after elephants and white rhinoceroses. Adults average between 1,500 and 3,000 kilograms. Almost none of that is fat. The bulk is muscle, dense, close-packed, built for sustained force rather than speed. They can reach 30 kilometers per hour over short distances on land. In water, they do not swim. They walk along the bottom, pushing off the substrate in controlled bounds, surfacing to breathe on a 4 to 5 minute cycle without any conscious decision required. The breathing reflex operates during sleep. Hippos hold territory along river systems and lake shores, and the confrontations between males are among the most physically direct in the animal kingdom. The yawn, the wide, prolonged display of the mouth opening to full extension, is not fatigue. It is a declaration. The canines of an adult male grow continuously and can reach 50 centimeters in length. The display shows them. The response from a rival male is either a matching display or a retreat. When neither retreats, the confrontation becomes physical, and the physical confrontation involves those canines and the full weight of the animal behind them. Territorial marking involves spinning the tail rapidly while defecating, distributing the material outward across a wide area. The function is chemical signaling at maximum coverage. Every individual in the surrounding area understands what the distribution pattern means. No individual ignores it. Hippos do not share water space with other large animals voluntarily. Crocodiles that establish themselves within a hippo's territorial stretch are driven out. Not because hippos eat crocodiles, or because adult crocodiles represent a consistent direct threat, but because the territory is the territory. The space is managed as a single controlled zone, and large predators operating within it are not a variable the territorial male accommodates. Documented engagements between hippos and crocodiles in which no feeding was involved, initiated by the hippo, have been observed and recorded across multiple field sites. During periods of severe drought, when water contracts and hippo populations compress into shrinking sections of remaining habitat, behavioral patterns that hold under normal conditions have been documented breaking down. Cases of hippos consuming individuals that have already fallen, behavior not observed under normal environmental conditions, have been recorded under extreme resource stress. The biology carries a contingency that most descriptions of the species omit. It exists. It activates when the threshold is met. The animal responsible for more human fatalities in Africa annually than any other large mammal is not the lion. It is not the crocodile. It is this one. That fact tends to land differently once the yawn has been properly explained. Northern elephant seal. The beach in January along the central California coast is occupied. Adult male northern elephant seals, Mirunga angustirostris, reaching nearly 5 meters in length and up to 2,300 kilograms, are distributed across the shingle in postures that communicate status without ambiguity. The largest and most centrally positioned males hold ground closest to where females rest. Every other male is positioned in relation to them, in a gradient that runs from that center outward toward the water's edge. The spatial arrangement alone tells you the social structure. The male at the center hasn't eaten in 2 months. He will not eat again until the season concludes. His body is consuming its own reserves, fat first, then muscle, to sustain the physical output required to hold his position. If he leaves to feed, the ground is contested within hours. The calculation is that holding long enough is worth the cost of not leaving. His body mass at the end of the season is visibly reduced from what it was at the start. Some males don't fully recover between seasons. A small number don't return at all. At the colony's edge, peripheral males watch. Younger, smaller, not yet capable of holding central territory, they form loose observational clusters. When a resident shows signs of physical depletion, they probe. Some have discovered a secondary approach, compressing the large inflatable nasal structure, the one that gives the species its name, flattening it enough to alter the visual profile. The resident male's recognition system is calibrated for the full display of arrival. A reduced version reads as something other than an immediate challenge, at least long enough to get closer. It works sometimes, not always. The resident male has been doing this longer. The confrontations between males involve rearing upright and driving forward, chest meeting chest, with impact that carries significant distance. Elephant seals have reinforced rib cages built for this specific load. The scarring that accumulates on the necks and upper chests of adult males across multiple seasons is a permanent record of ground contested and held. It does not fade. When these animals leave the beach, they are alone. For 9 or 10 months. Satellite tracking data shows individual seals covering up to 18,000 kilometers in a single foraging trip, diving to 1,500 meters, holding breath for up to 2 hours per dive. During those deep dives, the physiology shifts into a state with no equivalent in terrestrial mammals. The spleen contracts and releases a reserve of oxygen-rich red blood cells into circulation. The heart rate drops to as low as 4 beats per minute. Blood flow is rerouted away from peripheral tissue and concentrated around the brain and heart. The animal compresses its own biology to function at a depth where the pressure would be fatal to almost anything else its size. 9 months of that. Then the beach. 2 months without eating. The same confrontation with the same rivals on the same strip of cold sand. All of it, every year, without apparent reconsideration. African buffalo. Days after a hunting party had wounded one of their members and departed, the herd came back. They tracked the group to their camp, identified the specific individuals involved, and engaged. This has been documented enough times across different contexts that it is no longer treated as unusual. It is a recognized behavioral tendency of the African buffalo, Synchorus kaffir. They track, they hold the information, they return. The concept of a prey animal maintaining a targeted grievance over multiple days and acting on it is not the concept most people bring to a large bovid. It is the correct one for this species. African buffaloes are heavy, between 500 and 900 kilograms in adults, with a boss, the fused horn base forming a continuous plate of hardened keratin across the top of the skull that functions simultaneously as weapon and shield. They have never been domesticated. Every attempt across recorded history has failed. Their behavioral profile under captivity does not shift toward tractability the way domesticated bovids' profiles shift. The baseline does not move. When a lion brings down a buffalo, the minutes that follow are not settled. Herd members have been observed organizing a response, not retreating, not observing from a distance, but converging in coordinated groups and applying sustained collective pressure until the lion's position becomes untenable. The spatial logic of these responses has been filmed in enough detail to show the pattern. Larger males in front, formation maintaining contact, the aggregate force exceeding what a single predator or even a small coalition can manage at a sustained cost. The lion lets go or absorbs consequences it didn't plan for. The herd maintains an ongoing threat assessment of the predator population in its range. When an opportunity presents, a juvenile lion separated from its group, an injured predator in an exposed position, the herd has been documented acting on it preventively, not in direct response to an active attack, but as a reduction of future risk from a specific individual. The behavioral literature discusses this directly. The buffalo is applying forward-looking threat calculation that the standard prey animal framework does not account for. Group movement decisions are studied as a working model of distributed consensus. When the herd is resting and individuals begin to consider relocating toward water, toward grazing, away from an area, females stand, orient their bodies toward the preferred direction, and settle again. Others observe and add their own orientations over the following minutes. The aggregate of those individual postures builds into a directional signal the group reads and follows. No individual issues an instruction. The most socially central individuals carry more weight in the signal. The group moves by the sum of stated preferences, not by command. When a herd member is seized by a crocodile at a water crossing, other members have entered the water to engage the crocodile directly. The crocodile, in its element, holding a large animal in a grip specifically designed to prevent escape, encounters a group response it was not accounting for when it selected the target. The herd going into the water, with the physical exposure that involves for animals not built for aquatic engagement, reflects something about how the group weights the cost of inaction. The oxpecker birds that travel on the backs of buffalo are not incidental companions. They consume ticks and parasites, which is a net benefit to the buffalo. They also take flight the instant they detect something the buffalo hasn't yet registered. A bird suddenly lifting from a buffalo's back is one of the most reliable early warning signals available in the open savanna. The buffalo carries a distributed sensory extension as part of its daily biology. No formal arrangement was required. The mutual benefit maintains it. Sea lion. The male California sea lion, Zalaphus californianus, holding the prime section of beach, has not eaten in approximately 2 months. He will not eat again until the reproductive season ends. His body is running on reserves, fat first, then muscle tissue, and the depletion is visible in his silhouette across the weeks. He cannot leave to feed. If he leaves, his position is contested within hours by males who have been watching from the edge of the colony for exactly this moment. The calculation he is making is the same one the elephant seal made on the beach described earlier. The return from holding the position is worth the cost of not leaving it. Whether the math holds depends on how the season resolves. Sea lions belong to the family Otariidae, the eared seals, distinguished from true seals by the small external ear flap, and, more practically, by the ability to rotate the rear flippers forward and use all 4 limbs on land. A California sea lion that needs to move across a beach moves faster than most people expect from an animal that size. Over short distances on sand, they have been recorded covering ground at speeds that exceed a running human. The animal that looks stationary from a distance is not stationary. Adult males reach up to 300 kilograms. In a territorial confrontation, that weight is applied directly. 2 males rearing, pressing chest to chest, each working to drive the other back through sustained positional force. The ribcage absorbs it. The scarring that accumulates on the neck and upper chest across multiple seasons is the physical record of every position held and every challenge absorbed. Peripheral males without established territory form loose coalitions and probe the edges of dominant holdings, timing their attempts around signs of physical depletion in the resident. The window where 2 months without eating has noticeably reduced his capacity is the window they are waiting for. The vibrissae, the whisker array on the muzzle, are among the most precisely engineered sensory instruments in any marine mammal. Each whisker has a specific undulating geometry that reduces the vibration generated by the animal's own movement while amplifying external signals. A sea lion moving through water can detect the hydrodynamic trail left by a fish that passed through the area up to 30 seconds earlier and can follow that trail accurately enough to intercept. In controlled testing with all visual information removed, sea lions tracked moving targets via vibrissae alone with accuracy rates matching their performance under full visibility. The system operates independently of light, which in the ocean below the photic zone is the condition that matters most. Rafting, the posture where a sea lion at the surface extends one or both rear flippers vertically above the waterline, is thermoregulation through the extremities. The flippers are densely vascularized. Extended above the surface in warm conditions, they radiate heat away from the core. Extended into sunlight in cold conditions, they absorb solar energy and carry it back into circulation. The animal regulates core temperature through the one part of its body it can position above or below the surface without effort. A single extended flipper at the right angle, cutting through low chop, looks enough like a fin that it has redirected marine traffic more than once. The female's milk contains roughly 50% fat. Human milk averages around 4%. Cow's milk, for reference, sits near 4% as well. The caloric density of sea lion milk has no equivalent among terrestrial mammals, and the growth rate it produces in pups reflects this directly. The pup needs to reach a body mass sufficient to survive its first independent winter before the female's availability to nurse it ends. The deadline is fixed. The milk is the response to the deadline. The male on the beach, depleted and scarred. The peripheral coalition watching from the waterline. 2 months without food, held against every other male in the colony. All of it runs in service of one pup, somewhere on that beach, having enough reserves to make it to spring. That is the entire point of the structure. That is what it produces. European rabbit. The sound a rabbit makes when it's caught is not what most people expect. It is loud, high-pitched, and distinctly human in character. The kind of sound that makes people stop and look around. It has been described, repeatedly and by different observers in different contexts, as a scream, not a squeak, not a squeal, a scream. The European rabbit, Oryctolagus cuniculus, is one of the quietest animals under normal conditions. It is not quiet in the conditions where it needs to be heard. Rabbits live in underground warrens, networks of tunnels and chambers extending meters below the surface, housing dozens of individuals across connected spaces. The warren is the resource. It provides predator protection, stable temperature, and nesting space. It is also what the social structure is organized around, and competing for control of it is not a reserved process. Dominant females manage the reproductive space of the warren with consistency. Other females in the group that produce young in territory, the dominant female considers hers fine that those young ones do not remain. The removal is systematic. Subordinate females respond by nesting in peripheral chambers, closer to the surface, less insulated, more exposed, or by timing their reproductive cycles around the dominant female's attention. The dominant female's position is not established in a single confrontation and then left. It is maintained through continuous enforcement of the terms. Male confrontations at the warren's boundaries are physical in a way that the animal's appearance does not suggest. An adult male rabbit uses the hind legs, powerful enough to generate the propulsive force behind a standing jump of over a meter, as contact weapons in direct confrontations. Kicks delivered from a rearing position can open significant wounds on arrival. The maneuver called the binky, a high contorted leap that in a relaxed context appears to express nothing more than surplus energy, is, in a confrontation context, a rapid, unpredictable directional change designed to make the animal difficult to track and intercept. The same motion that looks like joy in a safe environment is an evasion tactic in an unsafe one. Rabbits practice coprophagy, consuming their own droppings. Not all droppings, a specific type produced in the cecum that contains nutrients and beneficial microorganisms the digestive system did not fully extract on the first pass. The rabbit recovers these directly from the body before they contact the ground. It is a required component of the digestive process. Rabbits prevented from doing it develop nutritional deficiencies. Observers who encounter this behavior without prior context find it confusing. The rabbit is not confused. The reproductive output of a single female under favorable conditions is worth stating numerically. 1 female, 1 season, potentially 8 litters, up to 6 offspring per litter. Those offspring reach reproductive maturity in approximately 4 months. If conditions hold, the female's grandchildren are reproducing within the same season she began. Estimated total descendants attributable to a single female across one productive season approaches 800 individuals. The warren she is fighting to control is not an abstract status symbol. It is the physical infrastructure for a population expansion that requires a defended stable base to function. The digestive system is the structural vulnerability that the whole animal is built around. The continuous movement of material through the rabbit's gut must be maintained without extended interruption. Sustained stress, abrupt dietary change, or insufficient movement can slow or halt that motility. When it stops, gas accumulates, the gut begins to fail, and the animal's condition deteriorates rapidly. The condition is called gastrointestinal stasis. It is the leading non-infectious cause of decline in the species. An animal capable of generating 800 descendants in a season can be brought down by a stress response significant enough to pause its digestion. The warren is worth the fight. The warren is also the thing keeping the rabbit alive while it fights for it. Mute swan. Technically, every mute swan, Cygnus olor, in open water in England and Wales belongs to the crown. This is not a metaphor or a ceremonial relic. It is active law, formalized in the 12th century and never repealed. The monarchy owns the swans. The swans are unaware of this arrangement and would not modify their behavior if informed. The mute swan is the heaviest flying bird native to Europe. Adults average between 10 and 12 kilograms, with wingspans reaching 240 centimeters. The wings are not only for flight. The leading edge contains a dense, hardened bone structure that, used as a strike in direct confrontation, delivers force sufficient to fracture small bones in a human hand or wrist. This has been documented. The swan does not reserve this response for other swans. Dogs that entered territorial water, boats that approached a nest too closely, and people who waded into the wrong section of river have all received it without warning from the bird delivering it. The neck carries 25 vertebrae. A human neck has 7. The range of motion this provides is not primarily for reaching underwater vegetation. It is for reach in general. In confrontation, a swan can project its head and neck with a whipping force and add an extension that gives it a significant range advantage over almost anything it chooses to engage. Combined with the wing strike and the weight of the bird driving both, a mute swan in active territorial defense is not an opponent most water birds or medium-sized land animals are prepared to handle. The pre-attack display, called busking, involves the wings raised and arched above the back while the neck is drawn close to the body, creating a profile significantly wider and taller than the resting bird. In this posture, the swan moves forward across the water surface in complete silence. Most animals reading this display respond before the bird reaches them. The ones that don't have committed to finding out what comes after the display ends. Same-sex pairings in mute swans are documented frequently enough to be treated as a normal variation of the species' social behavior. Male pairs have been observed acquiring and holding nest sites using the same territorial intensity as any other pairing. In documented cases, male pairs displaced a female from her existing nest and continued the incubation of the clutch she had already produced, maintaining the protective and incubation behaviors at the same level as any other breeding pair. The territorial commitment did not change with the pair's composition. The eggs did not appear to register the difference either. Long-term pair bonds in mute swans are behaviorally consequential in a specific way. Pairs that have held territory together across multiple seasons develop coordinated patrol and defense patterns, alternating display positions during confrontations, covering overlapping angles around the nest, responding to incursions as a unit. When one member of an established pair is no longer present, the surviving bird's behavioral engagement changes measurably. Activity levels fall. Territorial participation decreases. Stress hormone levels, cortisol primarily, remain elevated for an extended period. Sustained elevated cortisol suppresses immune function. The animal's physical condition declines in ways consistent with chronic stress rather than acute injury. The mechanism has been observed consistently enough across captive and wild populations to be documented as a recognized pattern. It is a physiological response to social loss. It is not sentiment, it is endocrinology. The mute in the name is partly accurate. The species does not produce the resonant carrying calls of other swan species, but it is not silent. It hisses, snorts, and grunts across a range of social contexts. What it relies on primarily, however, is posture. The full communicative repertoire of a mute swan is expressed through body configuration, wing position, neck angle, movement direction, and movement speed. The loudest thing a mute swan does in a confrontation is move. Everything it is communicating is visible in the body from a distance before contact is made. The absence of a large vocal signal makes the physical signal more complete, not less. It is, officially, property of the king. It is, practically, property of no one. Ring-tailed lemur. The ring-tailed lemur, Lemur cata, conducts one of its primary territorial disputes through smell. Specifically, the male rubs secretions from the scent glands on his wrists into his tail, pulls the tail forward across his body, and waves it, repeatedly, at close range, toward a rival. The rival does the same. They stand facing each other and compete on the basis of whose chemical output is more effectively unpleasant. The one whose scent display is less compelling retreats. Observers present at these encounters have described the proximity experience as notable in a way that makes neutral language difficult. This is called a stink fight. It is a technically accurate name. It is also the primary form of inter-male territorial display in a species where females hold every significant position of social authority. Ring-tailed lemurs exist only in Madagascar, the island separated from the African mainland approximately 160 million years ago. The ancestral lemur lineage that reached it, almost certainly by accidental oceanic displacement on floating vegetation, has been evolving in complete isolation ever since. Every behavioral and physiological characteristic of this species developed without contact with the rest of the primate lineage. There is no ring-tailed lemur anywhere else on Earth. There never has been. The social structure is matriarchal without qualification or exception. Females have absolute feeding priority over all males, regardless of male size, age, or rank within the male hierarchy. A male that reaches for food before a female in his group has reached for it will be corrected immediately and physically. This is not a tendency or a general pattern observed in most groups. It is a consistent, enforced rule across every studied wild population, with no documented exceptions. The dominant female feeds first. Subordinate females feed before any male. The male hierarchy, real and actively maintained through the stink fights and through occasional direct physical contact, operates entirely within the space the female hierarchy has already defined and cannot renegotiate. When two groups meet at a territorial overlap zone, the females lead the confrontation. The stink fights manage inter-male tension at the edges. The female-led charges handle everything else. A dominant female initiating a forward approach toward a rival group is not demonstrating. The group behind her is moving. Ring-tailed lemurs collect specific species of millipede, rub them across their fur, and then chew on them directly. The millipedes in question produce benzoquinone compounds as defensive secretions, chemical deterrents that are irritating to most animals and toxic to many parasites. The anti-parasitic function of applying them to the fur is plausible and likely part of the behavior's value. What has also been observed is that the lemur's behavior during and immediately after the rubbing process, elevated vocalization, altered posture, reduced responsiveness to surrounding stimuli, is consistent with a secondary psychoactive effect from the compounds. The millipedes are sought out deliberately. Multiple individuals across multiple groups have been documented doing this. It is not accidental contact with an incidental substance. They go looking for it. The morning sun basking posture, seated upright, arms extended to the sides, chest oriented directly toward the light, has been described by visitors to Madagascar as resembling a contemplative pose from various human traditions. The actual function is thermal. Ring-tailed lemurs lose body heat rapidly during cold nights and require solar input in the early morning to restore core temperature before the day's activity becomes possible. The posture maximizes exposed surface area at the moment when solar input is most useful. The animal is solving a heat management problem. The pose looks the way it does because that is the most efficient geometric solution to the problem. The tail is longer than the animal's body. It carries 13 alternating black and white bands. In the stink fight, it is a chemical dispersal tool, loading compounds from the wrist glands and directing them toward the opponent. In group movement through dense vegetation, it serves as a visual signal, raised and visible above the understory, keeping the group oriented to each other across terrain where direct line of sight is limited. It is a multifunctional structure that happens to also be the most visually distinctive thing about an animal that has been developing its own solutions in isolation for tens of millions of years. The stink fight ends when one male has assessed the situation and decided the position isn't worth the continued exposure. The winner doesn't follow. He's already where he needed to be. Orca. Starting in 2020, in the waters off the Iberian Peninsula, the coasts of Spain and Portugal, groups of orcas began approaching sailing vessels and making contact with the rudders. The interactions were not accidental. The orcas returned to boats repeatedly in the same areas, engaged the rudder specifically, and in a number of cases applied sufficient force to disable steering or separate the rudder from the hull entirely. Boats required rescue. The behavior spread. By 2023, it had been documented in hundreds of separate encounters across a widening geographic range, and researchers confirmed that younger orcas present during these interactions were replicating the technique in subsequent encounters of their own. No one has produced a definitive explanation for why this started. The leading hypothesis involves a learned behavior that originated with one or a small number of individuals and propagated outward through social transmission. What is documented is that the behavior is not random contact. It is targeted, it is consistent, and it is being actively passed on. The orca, Orcanus orca, is not a whale. It is the largest member of the dolphin family, Delphinidae, which makes it a very large dolphin with a name that has been misleading people since it was assigned. Adults reach up to 8 meters in length and 5,500 kilograms. The brain is approximately 5 times the mass of a human brain and is densely convoluted. The surface folding that creates processing area is extensive. It also contains a region involved in emotional and social processing that has no direct equivalent in the human brain. The structural implication is that the social and emotional life of an orca may have dimensions that human neurology is not equipped to model from the inside. Orca populations are divided into ecotypes, distinct groups differing in diet, behavior, social structure, and vocalization. Ecotypes share ocean space but do not interbreed. They have different hunting methods, different prey preferences, and, in some cases, measurably different body proportions. When ecotypes overlap in range, they compete directly for preferred hunting routes and prey populations. That competition is intergroup conflict operating over a long enough timeline that it has produced divergence between the competing populations. This is not occasional friction. It is a sustained multi-generational pressure that has shaped what each group is. Specific hunting techniques are not distributed across the species. They exist within lineages and are transmitted through instruction. Intentional stranding, the technique of beaching in shallow water to take prey on shore and then working back into the water, is taught by experienced adults to the juveniles of their specific group. Groups that do not use this technique are not exposed to it. The knowledge stays inside the lineage that developed it. What a group of orcas knows is what their ancestors worked out and maintained, and it does not leave them voluntarily. When orcas locate a great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, the interaction follows a documented pattern. The orcas isolate the shark, maneuver it into a position of tonic immobility, a paralytic state sharks enter when held inverted, and extract the liver. The liver of a great white is large, calorie-dense, and oil-rich. The rest of the animal is left behind. The targeting is specific, not a feeding on the shark as a whole, but a precise extraction of one organ. This has been confirmed across multiple documented encounters on multiple continents. The consequence for local shark populations is immediate and measurable. When orcas enter a range, great white sharks leave. Acoustic tagging data has tracked individual sharks that had occupied specific coastal zones for years, departing within hours of orca presence being recorded nearby, and not returning until the orcas had been absent for extended periods. The animal that sits at the top of the food chain in nearly every coastal marine ecosystem responds to orcas by vacating the area. There is no natural predator of an adult orca anywhere on Earth. There is no documented case of any wild animal successfully preying on one. The species occupies the absolute apex of the marine food chain across every ocean, in every temperature range, at every depth they choose to operate. Every predator in the water has a version of the calculation that places them somewhere on the hierarchy. Orcas are the answer to all of them. The boats off the coast of Spain are still being approached. The juveniles are still watching. The technique is still spreading. Pepsis wasp. On the Schmidt Sting Pain Index, a scale compiled by entomologist Justin Schmidt through the methodologically committed approach of allowing himself to be stung by the species he was rating, the tarantula hawk wasp, Pepsis species, sits near the top. Schmidt's published description of the experience: blinding, fierce, shockingly electric. A running hairdryer has just fallen into your bubble bath. The rating is a 4 out of 4. The acute phase lasts approximately 3 minutes. Schmidt's clinical recommendation for those 3 minutes is to lie down and produce whatever sounds seem appropriate, because coordinated motor function is not realistically available. The male does not sting. The apparatus belongs entirely to the female, and she uses it for one purpose. The tarantula hawk wasp is a solitary hunting wasp found across the American Southwest, Central and South America, and parts of South Asia and Africa. Females locate tarantulas by tracking chemical signals through the air at distances that seem implausible given the relative sizes involved. When a female locates a tarantula, she engages it directly, maneuvering under the spider and placing a strike into a specific cluster of nerve ganglia on the underside of the abdomen. A correctly delivered strike produces complete paralysis within seconds. The spider remains alive, its metabolic processes continuing, its tissues viable, but it cannot move. A tarantula outweighs the wasp considerably. Its own venom is functional against most threats of comparable scale. Its reaction speed over short distances is real. The wasp resolves the encounter through positional accuracy rather than through force or chemical potency. The strike has to land in the correct location. If it does, none of the spider's other advantages apply. If it doesn't, the encounter goes differently. The paralyzed tarantula is transported to a burrow the female has already prepared. Sometimes the spider's own burrow, depending on the species. A single egg is deposited on the spider's body. The burrow is sealed. When the larva emerges, it begins consuming the spider from the exterior inward, moving through non-essential reserves first: fat deposits, non-critical muscle tissue, working toward the systems the spider cannot lose without the whole organism failing. The spider does not recover between the moment of paralysis and the moment the larva finishes. The larva does not accelerate. The sequence is determined by which tissue runs out in which order. This strategy, consuming a host that remains biologically active throughout the process, maintained in a viable state precisely because the larva needs the tissue to remain fresh, is called parasitoidism. The distinction from standard parasitism is that the host does not survive it. The wasp larva is not extracting resources while the host continues its life. It is using the host as a sealed, self-sustaining food supply, engineered by the adult female before the larva exists, consumed from the outside and over the course of development. The host's continued biological function is the design feature. The adult female, for her own nutrition, visits flowers. The predation, the precision, the paralysis, the sealed burrow, the months of larval development inside an immobilized spider, all of that is infrastructure for the next generation. The adult herself feeds on nectar. The confrontation between a Pepsis female and a tarantula is one of the most studied predator-prey dynamics in entomology. Every variable favors the spider: size, strength, chemical armament, speed, familiarity with the terrain. The wasp enters the encounter with one advantage: she knows exactly where the strike has to go, and nothing in the spider's defensive repertoire was specifically selected to prevent her from reaching that point. That single asymmetry resolves the encounter before anything else becomes relevant. Barn owl. In complete darkness, no ambient light, no reflected signal, nothing. A barn owl, Tyto alba, can locate and intercept a moving mouse using only the sound the mouse makes moving through dry grass. This was tested under controlled laboratory conditions, with all light removed and the floor covered in material that eliminated any visual tracking possibility. The owl found the target, consistently. The guidance system was acoustic, and it was sufficient. The face is the instrument. The heart-shaped facial disc, the feature that makes barn owls immediately identifiable, is not incidental. It is a parabolic sound-collecting structure. The feathers arranged in a configuration that channels incoming sound toward the ear openings on either side of the skull and focuses it before it reaches the auditory system. The effective acoustic aperture of the disc is substantially larger than the owl's head, amplifying and directionally concentrating the signal before any neural processing begins. The ear openings are not level with each other. The left sits slightly higher on the skull than the right. This asymmetry means that a sound arriving from directly below reaches the two ears at fractionally different times, the time differential encoding the vertical angle of the source. Combined with the horizontal timing difference that bilateral ear placement produces, the barn owl triangulates sound in 3 dimensions with a measured precision of approximately 1 degree of arc in both planes. That resolution exceeds what most animals achieve with vision in adequate light. The barn owl achieves it with sound, with no light, in the moment the information becomes relevant. The wing feathers have a comb-like microstructure along the leading edge that interrupts the turbulent airflow that would otherwise generate sound as the wing moves. The result is a wing that produces no detectable noise in flight. A barn owl arriving at hunting speed from above is acoustically invisible to its target. The mouse's own movement through the grass is the loudest thing happening in the encounter. Barn owls hold territories around reliable food sources, grain storage buildings, church towers, collapsed agricultural structures, open fields with consistent small mammal populations. When another bird of prey establishes a presence in held territory, the barn owl's response is a silent approach from altitude, arriving from a direction the intruder cannot track because the flight generates no sound to follow. Most territorial interactions resolve before the intruder has fully processed that they have started. In the nest, when food intake falls short of what the full clutch requires, the nest adjusts on its own terms. The most developed chick, the one with the physical advantage established by hatching sequence, consumes the one with the least. This is not an emergency behavior triggered by exceptional scarcity. It is a documented and consistent feature of barn owl reproductive biology, observed across populations worldwide, treated in the literature as a normal outcome of lean breeding periods. The parents continue delivering what they can. The nest redistributes internally. Fewer chicks survive. Each of those chicks receives enough. When a barn owl is cornered on its roost and cannot immediately leave, it selects between 2 responses. It compresses and elongates its body, drawing the wings close and extending vertically until its silhouette resembles a broken branch stub. Or it spreads both wings to full extension and faces the threat directly. The white facial disc at maximum diameter, both dark eyes centered in it, the shape and contrast triggering avoidance responses in animals that do not consciously identify why they are backing away. The first response says nothing is here. The second response says something large is here. The owl reads the situation and chooses. Every prey item leaves behind what it cannot digest. Bone, fur, insect casing, compressed in the digestive system and expelled as a dense pellet through the mouth. These accumulate below roost sites across years, across decades, across centuries, in sites that have been used continuously. Ecologists and archaeologists have used barn owl pellet deposits to reconstruct the small mammal communities present in specific locations across long spans of time. The record of what the owl removed from the landscape is preserved in what the owl left beneath where it slept. Every ecosystem the barn owl occupies has the same relationship to it. The owl is present, the owl is functioning, and almost nothing sharing the space with it registers when it arrives or when it leaves. That is the last one. The video ends here.